And that's what climate change is about. It is literally, not figuratively, a clear and present danger.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday. It is the most important day of the week because it is the day the Heartland Institute broadcasts this here Climate Realism Show. My name is Jim Lakely. I'm the Vice President of the Heartland Institute and your host. I just want to tell you, and I'm sure you can agree, there is nothing else quite like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere. So I hope you will like, share, and subscribe and leave your comments underneath this video. All of these things, they're very easy to do. They convince YouTube's algorithm to smile upon this program, and that way the show can get in front of more people. And here's our weekly reminder, because big tech and the legacy media do not approve of the way we cover the Heartland Institute covers climate and energy policy on this program. Our YouTube channel has been demonetized, and it appears that might be permanent. So if you want to support this program, please visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS. That stands for the Climate Realism Show. And you can help make sure that this program is broadcast every single week. Any support that you can give is warmly welcome and greatly appreciated. And we also want to thank, as we always do at the top of the show, our streaming partners. Those folks being junkscience.com, CFACT, Climate Depot, and What's Up With That. You can watch this show streaming live on their X accounts, as well as the Heartland Institute's X account. So let's get started with the show. It's going to be a pretty sobering one and a pretty important one, I think. Today we have with us, as usual, Anthony Watts. He's a senior fellow at the Heartland Institute and the publisher of the most influential climate website in the world, What's Up With That. We also have H. Sterling Burnett. He is the director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute. And also Linnea Lueken. She's a research fellow for energy and environment policy at the Heartland Institute, and also the new host of our Thursday show, In the Tank. And we're also happy to welcome back to the show again our friend Chris Martz from CFACT. And later on in this program, we'll be bringing on onto the program Congressman Doug LaMalfa of California to talk with us more about the wildfires. Welcome, one and all. How are you today?
Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
First time on since the new year.
That's true. Yes, our first show after a 2-week hiatus. So we especially appreciate those of you who did not get too much despair that you didn't have a weekly show during Christmas and New Year's. But now we're back, and we'll be back every week, come hell or high water or wildfires, I suppose. We have a lot to cover today. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Linnea.
Oh, nothing. I was just going to add, I am creating some climate pollution today. My house is very chilly, and instead of running Red Dead Redemption in the background to get my computer to work hard enough to warm my office, I have
goodness.
Are
you burning oil?
Yes, I am.
Uh-oh.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Now, it's not just wildfires in California. A lot of the country is under blizzards and snow here. So
yeah.
I'm in Mississippi traveling to New Orleans for a conference, and we had 5.7 inches of snow at my house in Virginia from that first system a few days ago. And then I woke up this morning, we have 2 inches of snow here in Starkville, Mississippi. So I think I just bring winter weather wherever I go.
I'm sure a lot of us have our heat turned up and our CO2 pumping.
Yeah, well, I'm up here I'm going to ask Anthony Watts this question, him being the meteorologist on the program. So it's pretty crazy.
Let's not forget Chris. He's a meteorologist to be here in just a couple of months.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. So I'll ask both of you, actually. This is something I'm curious about. So Mississippi has now had more snow this winter than the northwest suburbs of Chicago, where I am located. And all of these storm systems that they keep warning us about just keep sliding beneath the Chicagoland area. Is that due to the jet stream, or am I going to get socked with some actual winter weather so I can use my snowblower pretty soon?
It's like these folks have never heard of the Alberta Clipper before. It's just weather. It's happened before. It's not a big deal. So what? They got more snow than usual.
And you're complaining that you're not having to use your snowblower?
It's fun.
But it just goes to show you that any weather event, any aberration, even in the slightest, immediately becomes a result of climate change because they don't have anything else in their repertoire of tools to blame it on. They just don't have any thought processes to think, well, gee, gosh, maybe let's look through history and see if anything like this happened before, And that's what we do here regularly. We look back at history and say, well, the same thing happened back in 1897, and it was bigger than that. So what? It's not climate change. But that's how these folks think sometimes.
Yep. All right. Once you finally get your degree, young man, then you can speak as authoritatively as Anthony wants, Chris Martz. But
yeah, that's what I'm always told. Of course, when I get my degree, it'll be that you don't have a master's degree, and then it'll they just change the goalposts.
Right. Yeah, that was a bit of an inside joke tease on Chris because he's constantly battling on X with people who say that he doesn't know what he's talking about. Not like me, I have a credential, and so we have an over-credentialed world and a that isn't as smart as
over-credentialed, underinformed.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get.
It doesn't matter how many credentials you have to the climate community. I mean, you look at people like Dr. Roy Spencer or Will Happer. These people have fantastic credentials. They have a fantastic track record of publishing peer-reviewed papers, but no, they're climate deniers. Let's not pay any attention to them.
Right. Yeah, it's because it doesn't matter. They only care about, and I've pointed this out multiple times, they only care about credentials so long as the person that they're talking about doesn't suit their narrative. Then the credentials matter.
Exactly. It's the right.
Greta Thunberg's don't matter. Bill Nye's don't matter. Al Gore's don't matter, but mine do.
and for the most part, for those guys, data doesn't matter.
Yeah. Feelings. They care about
facts.
Feelings.
Don't matter.
Feelings.
Yes.
I looked out my window and it was hot. I'm looking out my window right now and I've got snow on the ground. So
yeah. Well,
and this is Dallas, by the way.
Yes.
Maybe that we should.
Does Fort Worth ever cross your mind?
A new metric, climate feeling index.
I like Fort Worth. Best barbecue beef ribs over at Risky's.
All right. That's enough. Hey. We're going to get on with the show and with our Anthony Watts' favorite segment, and that is the crazy climate news of the week. Hit it, Andy. Yes. All right. Thank you, Bill Nye, Presidential Medal of Freedom recipient now. Yeah. Bill Nye, by the way.
How low that medal has gone now.
Yeah.
How inconsequential it is when you can just hand it out to corruptors and the uninformed.
You know what? As bad as he is now, I will say, if you had asked me if Bill Nye deserved a Medal of Freedom back in like 2008 when I was in school, and the best days were when the teacher would pull out the computer or the TV monitor cart to turn on Bill Nye the Science Guy instead of teaching us anything. That was a very good day. He deserved a medal then, not so much now.
But it's not just Bill Nye. I mean, you're handing them out to Liz Cheney because she's a champion of freedom. You're handing them out to George Soros, because he's a champion of freedom.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
At least the
medal has no meaning now, except that you've been good to me, and I'm going to give you a medal.
Yeah. At least they didn't award it to Yasser Arafat posthumously, you know?
Yeah, true. Well, maybe somebody who had received the Presidential Medal of Freedom when it meant something will go up to the White House and throw their medal over the White House fence like one John Kerry did way back in the day. We could only hope. All right. Our first item here today is about BlackRock, and they were the latest to get on the trend. This is from the New York Post. The headline says, BlackRock may exit woke business climate group Net Zero Alliance as backlash over ESG investing widens. And in fact, after the New York Post published this, BlackRock announced they did exit the woke business climate group Net Zero Alliance. And they were joined by previously, other banks had done the same. So let's read a little bit from this. BlackRock, which for years has courted controversy with its focus on so-called ESG, or environmental social governance investing, is exiting the so-called net zero coalition of top corporations who pledged to reach zero carbon emissions by 2050. The investment giant led by billionaire CEO Larry Fink is poised for a pivot from dictates of the United Nations-sponsored Net Zero Asset Managers Initiative as pressure grows on big corporations to reverse their woke business agendas. It comes as others have announced plans to leave a sister UN coalition for mega banks. In recent days, the nation's largest bank, JP Morgan Chase, plus Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Citigroup, Morgan Stanley, they all said they're dropping their membership from the UN Climate Coalition. BlackRock's departure is more significant. They are the world's largest investment fund with more than $10 trillion in assets under management. It was a leader in ESG investing with its top executives, including Fink, evangelizing on the need to use the company's investing might to force corporations to reduce their carbon footprint. A political backlash recently forced Fink and BlackRock to reverse course on ESG, and now other big ESG asset managers are doing so as well. Before we get to the panel on this, Andy, I want to show the audience the proof of what Larry Fink had said just a few years ago about how he thought best use the immense power of his firm, BlackRock.
You now make a point of that's an investment criteria for you.
Well, behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors. 54% of the incoming class are women. We added 4 more points in terms of diverse employment this year, and what we're doing internally is if you don't achieve these levels of impact, your compensation could be impacted. Okay,
we're doing the same thing.
And so it's just you have to force behaviors, and if you don't force behaviors, whether it's gender or race or just any way you want to say the composition of your team, you're going to be impacted. And that's not recruiting, it is development, as Ken said. And ultimately, it's still going to take time, but I am just as much shocked as Ken is that we have not seen more opportunities, and we're going to have to force change.
Right. And so the smugness of him and just the almost flippant way he just wants to abuse his power in the marketplace to force behaviors. Linnea, we talked a little bit about this on In the Tank yesterday at this time, and I was a little bit too optimistic in your mind that this was a real sea change in big banks and investment firms like BlackRock getting out of the forcing of behaviors when it comes to climate.
We need to unmute before I start so I don't get a Jim moment. And like I said yesterday, I'm a little bit skeptical that this is in earnest. I'm very hesitant to believe, maybe this is a unfair lack of charitability on my part, but I'm hesitant to believe that ESG or like net zero stuff is going away with companies like BlackRock after statements like that. When you have a fundamental belief that it's your like right or job to force behaviors using your asset management firm, I don't think that just goes away. I think what's happening is that they're seeing that they can't invest in the other stuff that they're interested in while also pursuing this so openly, like massive computer power needed for the expansion of AI and the like. And so I think what's going to happen is they're still going to recommend net zero for the rest of us, but they are going to invest in their own power supplies.
It's if possible worse than that, I think, Linnea. So this is image. Oh, we've got it now. The alliance. We're out. Go on their web pages and see if their ESG statements have disappeared from their plans. See if they say at their board meetings, at their stockholders meetings, that we are now out of ESG. This is in part a response to states who have sued them under antitrust laws as collaboration, and them losing the ability to issue bonds, to underwrite bonds, to have their stock held. They're losing money hand over fist. Now, one of the commentators in our chat said he's just following his company's desires. No, he's not. He's dictating to them. He controls their stock. Historically, asset managers were just that. Managers, not dictators. They tried to make the most money for the companies they held assets of possible. They didn't try and dictate where they should go. They said, this is where stocks are going to go. We anticipate this, and this is where we're going to invest your funds. Under Fink, he's not a puppet. He's a puppeteer. Under Fink and under DeMond and the others, they decided, no, we know best where these companies should be investing. And we're going to tell them. And it's our pet causes, our pet beliefs. He said, you've got to force people. He's using the power of all the stocks he holds to force people. And Linnea is right. That there's no evidence just because they've withdrawn publicly from these organizations, these UN organizations, that they've actually rejected the underlying policies. The biggest thing that indicates BlackRock has rejected some of it is that they're closing their ESG funds. They've lost so much money that they're rejiggering their assets to different funds. So, but long term, unless they change their statements on their web pages, unless they get rid of all that, unless they go before their stockholders and say, we're no longer in this business, people like BlackRock, Vanguard, they should not be telling the companies what they should be doing. They should be finding what the market is going to do and trying to leap on it before it happens to make money for their stockholders. But they shouldn't be dictating their gender policies, their climate policies, any of that. They should have no role. And I don't know that Fink has gotten that message.
That's a good point. They may be just simply
timid.
Yeah, putting it into the hidden agenda, and if they're in the hidden agenda, it won't be all that different than some of the things we've seen being done in climate science, where they take all of their back channel stuff and do it on private email instead of public email, so it isn't FOIA-able. Who knows what's going on?
Am I really the only one who's optimistic about this in any way? I mean, the way I look at it is that
we've been fooled so many times, I don't want to be fooled again,
All right, but let me put it this way. It's like, all right, so they're punching you in the face constantly like this, and then they stop punching you in the face. I think that's a good thing. I don't know. I'm going to take that as a win for right now, and hopefully we get better wins in the future, and that the punching doesn't continue. That's the bad part.
Now, Jim, I think they're punching you in the gut now,
or lower.
Yeah, well, they'll break their wrist on my gut. That's all I gotta say. And not because I'm in the best shape either. All right. Chris, do you have anything to add to this, or have you followed this issue? We can move on to the second one, which you might enjoy.
No, I don't have much to comment on. It's not something that I've really looked a whole lot at.
Okay. Well, just my attitude is there were other options here that could have happened. BlackRock could have not joined all of the other financial services firms getting on the lifeboat and jumping off the good ship net zero. They could have stayed on that and tried to repair it, and instead they're getting in the lifeboat. I will take that for now. We will keep a close eye on it, but it's better than what was in the past, and it was better than some alternatives. So I know I'm not usually the group optimist around here, but I'll take the W on that one. All right, let's move on to our second item here.
Jim, on your reasoning, if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says, I no longer believe in climate change very publicly, but then she keeps doing it behind the scenes or in legislation. We should take that as a win.
No, all right, fair enough. All right, we'll see who's right. You're probably right. I'm always the one wrong around here. All right, let's go. Let's go to our second item, and this is fantastic news. So this is from our friends at Climate Depot. It's an update. Mann versus Stein is in quote a small victory. A D.C. Superior Court judge denied Mann's motion seeking attorney's fees from Mark Stein and ordered Michael Mann to pay $530,820.21 in attorney fees and costs to National Review. Says here from our friends Climate Depot, who is a streaming partner with us. Finally, after 13 long years, Michael E. Mann has been made to put some personal skin in the game. Followers of last year's trial, and we covered it extensively here on this program, in the District of Columbia will recall that Mann testified that he had not contributed anything to his legal action against Mark Stein and his co-defendants, National Review and the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Nothing, nada, zilch. Where did the funding come from to pay his several lawyers for 12 plus years of his lawfare? Mann was not required to reveal that information under examination, and we can only speculate. But between last night and today, when this was published, the current D.C. Superior Court judge has made two orders. The first denied Mann's motion seeking attorney's fees from Mark Stein. Can you believe it? The second ordered Mann to pay $530,820.21 in attorney's fees and costs to National Review. As mentioned at the top, this will be the first time that Mann will be asked to contribute to the cost of his unending lawfare to silence criticism of a statistical model commonly referred to as the hockey stick due to its design. Now, Anthony, as I mentioned earlier, we covered the Mann versus Stein trial for several weeks here on this program, and I think it was some of our most watched programs ever at that time. And you've clashed with Michael Mann from time to time in your career, so you must be pretty happy to see this financial penalty inflicted upon the most litigious man in climate.
Well, I'm going to be a party pooper again and be like Sterling did before and say, well, yeah, he's been ordered to pay, but Mann has a habit of weaseling out of everything. For example, in the lawsuit with Tim Ball, which got dismissed and Mann lost, and Mann was supposed to pay court costs. Well, because it was done in Canada, Mann, they have no reach, they have no teeth, and they can't make Mann pay. And Tim Ball and his estate, his widow, never got a dime. In fact, we had to run on whatsupwiththat.com a help post to help pay for his funeral expenses because they didn't have enough money. That's the kind of person Michael Mann is. He will try to get out of this one way or another. His history has demonstrated that he will do that. And as a result, we are...
Whoops, you've cut out.
We lost Anthony's audio there. Oh, he accidentally muted himself somehow.
It wasn't just me.
Oh, crazy.
I still can't hear him.
Well,
there he is. There, you're back,
There
Anthony. Talk.
Yeah. Here's the problem. I have these two dogs right down here. One of them decided he's going to grab this wire and yank on it.
The perils of a live show.
There are two important points about this. First off, now Mann has been ordered to pay, and I don't know if it said it in the story that you were reading, but I read this morning. He had
it is technical difficulties Friday
now
for here on
Sterling.
the show. Goodness. Now
all that snow.
It's all that snow in Texas. They don't know how to handle it. But
yeah, now Mann has been ordered to pay in a very short period of time more than Stein has paid to date.
Yeah.
And secondly, that they're still considering Stein's that didn't rule on whether Stein actually owes the punitive damages in the amount that was that's still under consideration. My concern about the Mann thing, I mean, I'm happy that they have to pay, but his lawsuits were all underwritten by a legal group that was underwriting this stuff. So I don't think the court can actually force Mann personally to pay this. My suspicion is he can go to the legal group and get them to pay it, or he can start his own GoFundMe. Oh, I'm a poverty-stricken professor who somehow has, waged lawfare for 13 years, but I can't afford to pay the legal fee. So please donate. And there's Soros could write a check without even noticing it as a bank for that amount.
Yeah.
I'd like to think it was coming out of his personal account. My suspicion is it's not. It'll be built in as overhead to a government, a government research grant. Mann's legal fees, one line item in the research grant.
Yep. Well, it is good news. It is good news for Mark Stein. Again, I'll apply the Blackrock standard to this, in that there were other alternatives here, and this is the first time Michael Mann has seen justice in this whole process that has been going on now almost 13 years. So that is something that is to be applauded. All right.
It is good news, even if Mann doesn't pay.
Yeah,
it may dissuade the legal groups that have been backing him from backing further lawfare with this guy, or further lawfare at all. If they're not going to win their legal fees and they have to pay everything themselves, that it's like, hold it, I can only do that for so long.
Yep. All right, we're going to move on to our third item here, because we have hopefully we have a special guest coming in with us. Go ahead and add him to the stage. We see. Well, okay, we'll put him in a box here, and maybe he can he'll hear us and come on. But this is Congressman Doug LaMalfa from California. If you hear me, if you hear us, Congressman, we have you on screen. At least, well, we don't see you, but we have you in the stream, and hopefully we'll get to hear some comments from you soon. Let's move on to our third item here, though, and that is Biden's last climate moves. And there's a couple things to talk about here. This is a story from Zero Hedge. And this is how Joe Biden is quietly banning most gas-powered tankless water heaters. It says here, in a significant regulatory shift that took place quietly, of course, the day after Christmas, the Biden administration finalized new climate rules targeting natural gas-powered instantaneous water heaters. The Department of Energy, which traditionally uses a press release for such regulations, chose not to announce these changes publicly, raising eyebrows in... We're gonna mute you there, Congressman. There we go. Oop, I tried to. There we go. we can see you. We'll get you here in 1 second. So according to the Free Beacon, which reported on this, the new regulations, which aim to reduce carbon dioxide emissions, a move aligned with broader climate change mitigation efforts. However, regulations are set to remove approximately 40% of the current tankless water heater models from the market by 2029. This shift is expected to force consumers to opt for either more expensive or less efficient alternatives. An industry analysis forecasts that the average cost for a new water heater due to the regulations will be around $450. This price hike is poised to disproportionately affect low-income and senior households, who are among the most reliant on the more affordable models currently targeted for phase-out. Now, Sterling, this is just the latest example of the Biden bureaucrats screwing people over one last time on their way out the door, and then also gaslighting us. You'll remember that they said, quote, "We're not looking to ban your gas stove or your gas-powered cars." Yeah, right. But it seems to be no detail of somebody's personal life that they're not willing to regulate, including, your tankless water heater.
Yeah, there's a whole flurry of these things as he's going out the door. He's trying to burnish his...
Nope, Sterling went silent again. Oh, there we go.
There we go. There's Doug. Doug, hi, it's Anthony Watch. Can you hear me?
I see you and I hear you. I'm sorry about the mess here. We had some
No
type
problem.
of emergency over at our office building, so we got kicked out. And so I've been wandering for an area to find enough Wi-Fi, but I think we're up now.
Huh. Well, we've got a good picture and good audio from you now.
Congressman, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
joining the show. We appreciate it. We were just talking about...
Yeah, you bet. Thank you.
Yeah, I was wondering actually if I can get your comments on two things. We do the crazy climate news of the week, and one of the items was Joe Biden basically going to ban most tankless water heaters now, or make them so expensive, to fight climate change. And then you add on to that Joe Biden trying to take a bunch of offshore drilling offline, not allowing us to do offline. Now, I know there's things like the Congressional Review Act that is supposed to be used to stop these kinds of last minute out the door regulations and that sort of thing. So can you talk a little bit about how familiar you are with these sorts of last minute things Joe Biden is doing, and if Congress can and will do anything about it? And he froze. Hopefully he heard us, and we'll get back to him again. But all right. So any comments on you, Linnea? We went to you earlier about the offshore ban on yesterday's show on In the Tank, and you said, as infuriating as it may be, it might not really amount to much, or shouldn't make people as angry as I am about it, because a lot of that area isn't really great for oil exploration anyway.
Well, my ears definitely pricked up when at first I heard, what the kind of conservative media was saying was that Biden banned drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. And I thought, oh, all right. Well, that's like our entire, heavy crude offshore industry gone in one swoop. But it's actually not that it's okay. It's definitely bad. But he took a bunch of land, or I guess not land, but like continental shelf off of the table in the eastern Gulf of Mexico, which is not the most common area that you get very much drilling activity. A lot of that stuff is off limits already because of Florida saying, no, we're not going to allow drilling in our offshore waters. So a lot of that's already not something that was on the table. East Coast was also taken off the table. As far as I'm aware, there's no drilling that goes on the East Coast except up towards Canada and around like Newfoundland, I guess. So other than that, there's not much drilling there. West Coast, there is some currently active stuff along California, but they don't allow new drilling there anyway by the state level. And I don't think that Washington State or Oregon allow new drilling either. And then Alaska, it's the same embattled area that it's always been. That stuff is probably the closest to something that you could reasonably see drilling happen in the near future. But again, it's all areas that are either not used or are contested or have been kind of tug of war contested for a long time. So it's not the catastrophe that I would be worried about, but it's definitely bad. And I would prefer that not to be the case. I would prefer at least the opportunity to explore, be open pretty much everywhere. But I'm definitely not going to say it's a nothing burger. You don't want this stuff on the federal side happening at all. But it's kind of like a petulant little slap fight going on from Biden with regards to the oil field.
Yep, for sure. All right. Well, hey, now that we have Congressman LaMalfa here, we wanted to set you up, Congressman, by playing an excellent 1-minute speech you gave on the floor of the House, I guess not too long ago. So, Andy, producer, can you play that video, please?
California's on fire once again. Only now, instead of burning up the red counties and the forested areas to the north, it's devastating portions of Los Angeles. Everybody's seeing it on the news. Every year we know the Santa Ana winds are going to blow. Every year we know that there's going to be risk. So what is our governor doing to help stop the risk? Virtually nothing, other than showing up at press conferences and waving his arms around and having long practiced monologues about, oh, it's someone else's fault, this or that. So it's time for the governor to either bear down or get out of the way, because California keeps suffering. My county's up north, Carr Fire, Camp Fire, Dixie Fire, 1 million acres, and now it's hitting the constituents of Southern California hard. Why does this have to keep happening? Why is not anything being done to really mitigate the issue of forest management, of brush management, and lower the risk? Why is the water being cut off at the hydrants? Is it because he won't allow us to build the water storage we need for a growing population and for growing crops? We need to build Sites Reservoir. We need to raise Shasta Dam. We need to not let all the water keep rushing out to the Pacific Ocean through the Delta to supposedly save a smelt that doesn't exist. We need to get cracking on this. Governor Newsom, either get at it or get out of the way.
Well said, Doug. And thank you for being on with us. This is Congressman Doug LaMalfa. He's of the 1st District in Northern California. He has one of the largest districts in California, and there's a lot of timber in that district, and a lot of it has burned recently. Doug, in your statement on the House floor, are you basically saying Newsom should resign?
Nope, we can't hear you, Congressman.
No audio. You have to
I think you're
unmute
muted.
yourself.
Oop.
Yeah, just you see the microphone button down at the bottom? Press it and then it'll unmute you.
Oop.
There we go. We got you.
No, the audio isn't working. Yeah.
It may be a source issue.
It's probably a source issue. Can't really fix that remotely from here, I'm afraid.
We got you. We had you.
No, we're not getting any audio out of the congressman, unfortunately. Maybe he can go out and come back. Yeah, I don't hear anything from him. So,
yeah, unfortunately, Doug, we're not getting any solid audio from you, and I understand that you've had a lot of difficulty this morning. That there was an evacuation of the congressional offices, and that required you to move to another building and set up a temporary thing with your phone. And so, we appreciate you trying to make it work. Unfortunately, sometimes technical difficulties in live television are a real thing. I've been through dozens of them. And
well, suggest that he signs out and see if he can sign back in.
Yeah, let's just try. We'll try signing out.
Why don't you terminate your call, Doug, and try calling back and see if that, try linking back in.
Yep.
He keeps.
Okay. We'll get him out of there. Okay. Well, that'll give us a chance. Let's see.
We can let Chris Martz come in on the fires.
Yes. Well,
yeah. So the wildfires, it's the same saga. It's the copy paste pre-canned articles we see from the I call them the lamestream media. They never. It's just the same stuff over and over again. Every weather event's climate change. Heaven forbid should they try. There's a severe lack of curiosity among journalists in trying to figure out and what's actually going on with the fire situation, and reporting on it accurately. They just blame climate change, and they get fed a lot of these articles, especially from like things like world weather attribution, where they do these attribution studies on extreme events, and they say, well, Shell contributed to this amount, or ExxonMobil contributed this amount to this disaster. They're used to file lawsuits against these oil and natural gas companies. But the fires itself, there was a study that was published in 2021 in Science Magazine, Keeley et al. 2021, and they found that the air temperature during a fire and the precipitation deficits or surpluses before or after, or before in the weeks or months leading up to a fire, have little correlation to fire burn area or fire incidents, going back to 1948. And that's when that's the study period, 1948 to 2018. And over that 71-year period, there was very little correlation between fire burn area and maximum air temperature and precipitation, so the fuel moisture. Because the reason for this is because a lot of these small diameter fuels that become highly flammable when you get to Santa Ana wind events, you get that high pressure area over the Great Basin, and you get that low pressure area over the desert Southwest or Baja California, and then you get that tight southwestern pressure gradient, and that causes the wind to accelerate downslope the mountains, dry adiabatically, and you get these massive windstorms that can knock down trees and knock down power lines, knock down, somebody has a lantern, an oil lamp or a lantern or something out there on their patio, can knock it over and start a fire. And, you also have people that are out camping. You have lawnmower sparks, chainsaw sparks that can spark any fires. And of course, you have arson. So when you get these damaging wind events and it coincides with a fire, it's a recipe for disaster. And all these small diameter fuels, these twigs and leaves that are on the floor of the brush, especially these bushes. In the southern part of California, there's not as many trees. It's more so what's called I think it's called like a coyote bush. There's a more technical name for it, but I'm going to butcher it if I try to pronounce it. But that particular species of plant also is a major problem because they allow it to become overgrown. There's laws against trimming it and thinning it out. And so we see this in the northern part of the state with the forests. They don't clear out underbrush with controlled burns or mechanical thinning or whatnot. So we allow this accumulation of these small diameter fuels in the forest floor. They dry out really fast when you get these downslope wind events, these Santa Ana wind events. So you don't need a drought or abnormally dry conditions for this to occur. You can have relatively average precipitation, even slightly above average precipitation. If you get that downslope wind event, those fuels are going to dry out and it's going to become a tinderbox. So that study, as I mentioned, found little correlation between temperature and precipitation. What's more is that they found that 75% of Santa Ana wind events are not associated with fires. So that once again points to the fact that there are largely human ignitions that started. In fact, 100% of them in that region are human caused. And in Mediterranean California overall, about 97% of them between 1992 and 2012 were human caused from whatever was accidental or on purpose. And that was from a 2017 study. So the fire risk can be severely mitigated if people stop being careless, but that's not going to happen. And they had people like these arsonists in the case, because that's that, and also following the power lines are the leading cause since 1984 in these fires in Southern California. So utility companies need to be pressured, and there needs to be laws that force them to put all power lines underground and run all those underground, and have a higher police presence, higher firefighting presence, and stop just putting tens of millions of people into these areas that are high risk. That's just not sustainable.
Let's. I think we need to go back a little bit farther. California historically has been dry. It's an arid state, except in the very northern portion of it. It was one of the least populated regions of the continental United States when it was Native Americans before Europeans got here. And there's a reason for that. It's largely desert and scrub. It's chaparral. It didn't support agriculture. We formed something called the Bureau of Reclamation, with its goal was to make the desert bloom like a rose. How did it do that? It set up a lot of dams to ship water to California. There are more people there than nature said should be living there. We've created those conditions, making it open to people to move, because the climate there is nice. It's moderate. You got the ocean, you've got beautiful mountains, but you're putting more and more people at risk in areas that are historically prone to enormous wildfires. Now this one, last year, they had a lot of rain, a lot of moisture, snow and rain. They built up a lot of brush, chaparral. This region historically burned. You've got homes in the chaparral now. As Chris said, you don't cut it back. And then it dries out. And then it just takes a spark. Fires take fuel and an ignition source. And there's plenty of fuel. And so you get bigger. I don't say that they're bigger wildfires than we've had historically, but they are more costly because more and more expensive homes and more people are living there. So, there's a lot of causes, but what haven't caused it is climate change. There's no long-term 30-year trend in increasing wildfires, in unusual wildfires for that region.
Yeah. All right. So we are going to, there he is. We're going to attempt to bring Doug LaMalfa back in. Can you say something, Congressman, so we can see if we can hear you?
Okay. Are we on?
We are on. We hear you. Now, don't touch anything. Right. Don't touch anything. Don't move. We're going to be fine. All right. So we got a little bit out of sync here with the technical difficulties. Yeah. So Congressman, we're going to talk about the climate change and the climate change myths and the LA wildfires. But first, I want to set the stage here by referencing a piece that our Anthony Watts wrote on our Climate Realism site. The title is "No Mainstream Media: The Climate Change is Not to Blame for California's Wildfires." Anthony writes, "The devastating wildfires in Los Angeles have once again become a rallying cry for those blaming climate change for natural disasters. Recent coverage, such as stories in Axios and by the BBC, hastily and falsely connect these wildfires to, quote, a rare confluence of climate factors, a narrative that has become all too familiar. However, any such connection is unsupported by data. As is often the case, linking individual wildfires or even a single year's wildfires to long-term climate change oversimplifies complex natural events, failing to address the broader context. To truly understand these fires, we must consider history, meteorology, and land management, and not just the latest climate narrative. California has a long history of wildfires, of course, the vast majority of which occurred well before human-induced climate change became a point of discussion. Historical records and studies show that the region has always been prone to cycles of fire. For example, a study published by the U.S. Forest Service highlights the significant role of wildfires in the natural ecology of California, with fire return intervals ranging from decades to centuries, depending on the ecosystem. Native Americans, we're almost done, Native Americans set fires to manage vegetation and to prevent catastrophic wildfires. However, these practices were abandoned after European settlement, contributing to the accumulation of fuel in the forests. Today's fires, while tragic, fit into a long history of natural and human-influenced fire activity in the region. The cause? The Santa Ana winds, which is weather, not climate. Now, Anthony, this piece has been getting quite a bit of juice. I believe there was a Reddit post about it, and people should go to climaterealism.com right now. They can read the entire piece there. But this narrative, probably now more than ever, rears its head every time there's wildfires. And now when literally the entire world has its eyes on Los Angeles, debunking myths about climate change and wildfires is more important than ever.
Well, I'm going to hand it off to Doug and let him talk about it. And Doug, what's your take on all of this?
Well, yeah, let me just, we'll play along for a minute. Let's say climate change is all that the climate change people say it is. What do we do about it? What can we do about it? Can we change the weather? Can we change the planet's position with the sun? We can't do that stuff, but we can be managing our forest lands much differently than what we are. To have the number of trees per acre that is sustainable, right? And we can have much better water storage efforts. So, you know, if we don't have snowpack, if instead it becomes rain because we got warmer climate, then we could be storing more water by making more buckets to hold the rain in, since we don't have the time release of snow. So better managed forests that have the right amount of trees per acre that can stand a drier condition. That's if you want to play climate change, which I don't, because I don't really believe that somebody's SUV or my mom's hairspray or somehow is going to cause all this stuff. It's really an issue of, I think, a manipulation of statistics. You've probably seen we're around here when I have committee hearings. I ask the people, these experts, they call themselves on these panels, what amount of CO2 do you want to reduce from the atmosphere? And do you even know how much CO2 is in the atmosphere right now? And they never know. They're always off by a factor of 50 or 100 or more. They don't know it's 0.04% of the atmosphere, and that number has hardly changed relatively to the rest of the elements in the atmosphere over time. And we had a lot more CO2 eons ago. So that it's mostly nonsense. It's a manipulation, I think, to try and weaken our country, weaken our economy, and be able to seize control over that. So really what has to be done is defeat this climate change narrative and get back to America being the most productive place in the world that it can be. Because the net result, we're exporting our jobs, we're exporting our industries to areas that don't do them as cleanly or as nicely or with, you know, better labor law treatment than what you see overseas like that. So it's really, it's just bad information all the way around. So as far as tying it to these wildfires, you know, as I mentioned at the top, why don't we manage our forests together if it's a climate problem? But since it really isn't, we should be focused on better forest management no matter what. As you mentioned, Santa Ana winds. You mentioned the weather. We do have drought periods sometimes. And so whatever it is we're doing, right now what we have isn't working. And the U.S. Forest Service is not managing their lands. They have 193 million acres in their purview, and they hardly even touch 1% per year. So we'll never get anywhere going at that pace. So let's blame, if you want to sort of play a blame game, the incompetence we're seeing by state officials and even local ones down in LA with making priorities not fire suppression or fire readiness with their equipment, with their personnel. You see this thing where they're hiring people under DEI standards instead of who can actually fight fire and carry the equipment up a ladder or what have you. So they cut their funding for their fire department. They sent a bunch of equipment to Ukraine, and they don't want to build the infrastructure strong enough. You know, I heard they had 3 1 million gallon tanks that they were able to draw down in no amount of time. 1 million gallons sounds like a lot until you put it in farmers' terms. which that's about 3 acre-feet of water in that sense, which 1 acre of ag land uses about 3 to 4 acre-feet of water in a year. So it really isn't that much water. And so do they have the water availability from whatever source to keep up, or is there a problem because Newsom and the gang holds up building more water storage and getting water delivered? You know, the San Luis Reservoir should be getting filled up right now. The Delta pumps, there's state pumps, there's federal pumps at the Delta. They're running at 5% capacity, not filling the reservoir, not filling the aqueduct that could be going down, topping off other reservoirs down south. And I say this with the idea that, no, it isn't north versus south. We have plenty of water if we would store it and not let it all rush out to the ocean. So I could go all day on that. But
you know, you've been a champion.
Climate portion, there's things we can do on water supply and on forestry that would be very effective, no matter what you want to blame the climate on.
Yeah. Doug, you've been a champion for getting the Sites Reservoir built in Northern California. California has not built a single new reservoir since 1978, and this was the one that was supposed to have been built with that bill that bond that passed a few years ago. Why haven't they built it yet? What's the holdup?
Newsom and his appointed people are dragging their feet on it. So he's purported lately to try and boost it up, speed it up a little bit by a measure he had to make lawsuits less drawn out, because they're going to sue on it. They're suing on it. You know, they're trying to get their water permits lined up, their water right permit, and get started building. And supposedly we're on the precipice of starting to build on Sites Reservoir. We're going to be working on something very soon here with the new Trump administration, and also a Shasta Dam ring, which would mean another 600,000 acre feet there by raising it about 18 feet. So we might be able to do that even faster than Sites, who knows? But I believe Sites is going to keep moving along. But Newsom could have sped this up 6 years ago by not having a overbearing State Water Resources Control Board and the Water Commission that are dragging their feet on allotting the water rights that needs to happen to store sites. The water we're talking about isn't really going to be a big battle, because this is excess water for sites that would be coming out of the Sacramento River and during the high flows being released from Shasta. So it's not water that anybody's really going to miss, right? The same as, again, Northern California versus Southern California battles on water. Those are a lot more. Those are years ago battles. It really comes down to the left part of California versus the right, the coast versus the inland. The coast, where all the politicians are elected that stop all these projects from happening, whether we're talking forestry, water supply, whatever. That's where the problem is, because they elect the people that are stopping everything. They're electing Newsom. They're electing the people that are in the legislature that are helping appoint these water boards and stuff that put a stop to everything. So it doesn't, I appreciate your effort here and Heartland Institute and everybody on getting the climate realism that we need out there. And I talk about it in committee a lot. I think my colleagues around here all know the 0.04% number, because I keep, repeating it around here. That's what CO2 is. And when the experts show up on these panels, they don't even know how much CO2 is in the atmosphere, let alone how that target should.
I remember when you called one of them out. Yeah, that was awesome.
I made all 4 of them on the panel give me the number. They were all miles off on what it is. So,
Senator John Kennedy had the same thing. He grilled some expert witness about the percent of CO2 in the air. And when he was talking about how it's like the panelist said there's a significant portion of the atmosphere. I'm like, as an atmospheric science major myself, I'm like, oh my God, like this person doesn't know what they're talking about.
Maybe the only people that really know are like folks like us, and then maybe divers, since they have to put the right amount of air into the dive tanks and stuff, because I want to make a newer chart that shows what it looked like in 1960 versus right now. And we divide up the pie on there versus 78% nitrogen and 21% oxygen and 0.93% argon. It only leaves a skinny little slice for CO2 plus everything else. Some of the charts call CO2 trace gas, some calls it other. Okay, and so I'll make today's pie chart, and I'll make 60 years ago pie chart, and they will still look the same. So and people say, like, well, you wouldn't want that much arsenic in your water. Like, well, CO2 is not poison. CO2 is an important building block everything, right? So they pulled this scam off about 15 years ago. EP or somebody just pronounced CO2 is a poison, CO2 is bad, we must control it. No, and so we've been fighting that narrative the whole time.
That was a 2009 endangerment finding in the Obama administration. And it's funny because their only ground for calling carbon dioxide a pollutant is that it's a greenhouse gas that contributes to global warming. Okay, well, I agree with that, but that doesn't mean it's pollution, because pollution refers to something being toxic, like carbon monoxide or sulfur. It's funny because. Go ahead.
Oh, Chris, you're hitting it. Those are the bad ones. Carbon monoxide doesn't help anybody. Methane gas up in the atmosphere doesn't help, and people are doing things to try and capture more methane. That's what we should be drilling down on. Monoxide, we have better running car and truck engines than we ever have, and so those are areas we can actually mine to make improvements. And if we would get some credit for it and focus on that, this is actually completely taking us off the target of the things we should be looking at by playing this silly CO2 game.
Going back to the wildfire stuff, the other thing that they historically, regularly get wrong in your committee hearings, yours and John Kennedy's and others, is when they're asked, okay, if we do this, how much CO2 will it prevent? How much sea level rise will it prevent? How many acres will it protect from forest fire, from wildfires? They can never answer that. Or if they answer it, the answer is so small, it's not measured. It would not save Los Angeles. We could have gotten rid of all CO2 from the U.S. and Los Angeles would have still burned this week.
Yeah.
Great point, because they cannot point to a good stat on or what it costs. I've seen Senator John Kennedy also asking, well, what's the price on that? And they had some poor young man on there who was just getting rear end kicked on, how many trillions? How many trillions on that? And another panelist only one time said, well, we just have to get our act together. Like, well, that's not an answer, And so we need real answers to make real decisions, because what we do affects lives of all Americans and others around the world. And it costs, these are $1 trillion decisions on that. And so we shouldn't just make them willy nilly because it feels good. And so everybody appreciates real science,
Or they say it shows leadership. Oh, we're showing leadership by doing this, even if it has no effect.
Yeah, that's an important point that you made, Doug. Because I'm like Anthony, I have a meteorology background. I'm graduating in May with my atmospheric science degree, and as I pointed out on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, bad science. Legislators need to be informed with good science, because junk science leads to bad policy decisions that hurt millions of people. And we need to have our legislators, people, especially on the conservative side of things, people that are trying to be on maybe team reality, they need to be informed with good science. Ron DeSantis at a press conference, and he cited something that I posted. And it's good to see that you follow people like Anthony and are getting informed, because we need to have people that actually have teeth in this fight and fight back against some of the net zero stuff. That's kind of, as a scientist, seeing the media and Democratic politicians that pin every weather event on climate change, it's really intellectually lazy, and it does nothing to help solve the problem. They just want to they just think that spending money on decarbonization efforts is going to make everything, willy-nilly, great sunshine and rainbows.
It's absurd.
But it becomes standard operating procedure for them to just blame every weather event on it. And they maintain that Republicans want to protect big oil's profits, and they want to hold them liable for their climate inaction. And while it makes for a juicy headline, it does nothing to help people, because it's oversimplification of the physical processes involved, especially with wildfires, just stuff like hurricanes or floods or droughts and heat waves. And the directives to assign blame to fossil fuel companies and Republicans in Congress, or elect Trump, for delaying climate action. Those are a way for those people, especially progressives in California, in the case of Los Angeles, is a way for them to avoid drawing attention to their unfailed policies, like failed urban planning, failed to neglect, failure to address the thinning of the underbrush, and poor water resource management. And it's a way for them to advance along their net zero ideas and their control of energy and everything else to control people. And that's not going to help solve problems. They don't care about it's not really about climate that they care about. It's more about their policies that they want to enact. And that's, as a scientist in training, that's problematic to me.
Well, when I see these people, throwing orange paint on artwork around the world and calling that action, I mean, it's ready, fire, aim. They don't even know what they're talking about. Not that I claim to know everything myself, but people like you right in that room there that can impart a lot of wisdom. And again, Heartland Institute, others trying to, and they're going to call us all these dirty names. They're going to call us all, and we have to just be able to take it and work through it, because it's a fraud being perpetrated on those who are going to have to pay the price. And that's the U.S. and Western Europe. Again, the Germans almost froze themselves to death a couple winters ago because they got rid of their nuclear, and the natural gas they were going to rely upon was short, and Russia was going to cut them off. I mean, it's crazy. Oil and gas has actually caused freedom for many around the world with the potential. And hey, look at it this way: it saved the whales, because whale oil used to be what they would power lamps with around cities. And so it's not going to go away anytime soon. And Biden is just naive to think that, we're going to have this gone in 10. We're going to need oil and gas for at least 50 years, probably 100, probably always, unless they come through with battery technology that's amazingly more efficient than what we have today. And we can keep expanding, or start expanding once again, on nuclear generation. And if we get a breakthrough on fusion, that'd be amazing. So I talk a lot about nuclear around here, because you can get so much energy from a compact space, and you can put it proximate to where the demand is.
It's, oil and gas not just saved the whales, it saved human lives and cleaned the streets, because before oil and gas for transportation, you had horses and buggies, and there was a lot of horse manure in the streets that was polluting the water. You had toxic air emissions. Horses died and just laid on the streets rotting. They created a lot of cholera in New York, in Philadelphia. That went away with the horseless carriage.
Right.
Yeah, I can't imagine what our ag industry would look like, or transportation, if we didn't have the diesel engine right now, because until battery technology comes through dramatically more efficient and stronger, like we need to have at least quintuple the amount of energy we're getting from batteries, and their ability to charge and sustain and make longer trips and stuff. If we got to that point, then maybe we can have a conversation about it, but then the generation is going to be so woefully short, because heck, we're tearing out dams like the Klamath River. Those dams were there for hydroelectric generation, and then they're slowly pilfering the water away from other projects that aren't allowed to run through turbines and make CO2 free electricity that's available 24/7. Base load power, it's called. And instead, we're going to rely on tilting at windmills and solar panels from China. It's not a winning equation, and more people need to be woken up to this. Like, I hope they're waking up to how bad things is in Southern California with this fire. We've had Greenville and Canyon Dam, and of course Paradise burned to the ground in Northern California, and they got a lot of ink over that, a lot of print, but it doesn't seem like it has the same effect as what we're seeing in LA. And it's sad that we even have to have that conversation about people suffering in bigger waves in order to get the attention for how badly government has mismanaged our fire readiness and resiliency. The Pacific Palisades is gone now.
Yeah. Congressman, are you able to stick around for a few questions from our audience? I hope so.
Sure can. Yeah.
Okay.
As long as it's working good here, I'm just kind of found a place to have this that still has Wi-Fi. We're still, I think they opened up our building finally, but I'm going to stay until you're done with me.
Yeah, for as long as we can keep you. But the title of this podcast on the title card is "It is not climate change." So Anthony Watts, you have 1 minute to explain to our audience and everybody in the world why climate change has nothing to do with what's happening in LA these last week.
Okay, this is going to be like shooting fish in a barrel, but here goes. First of all, Santa Ana winds. That's the biggest factor. We have a satellite video that shows the Santa Ana winds in action with the fire. And this is very, very clear what's going on. You can see at the top of the screen, that's north and northeast. You're getting these winds coming off of the desert, and they are blowing fiercely, and they are fanning the fires. And that is weather, not climate. It happens in the space of hours, not decades. It's weather, not climate. That's number one. Number two, the reason it's not climate is because the weather patterns vary from year to year. One year we get a lot of rain and we get more greenery, and then the next year it dries up. We don't get much rain, and all of a sudden we've got all this dry brush. That's a year-to-year thing. That's weather, not climate. And then finally, there's news articles that are popping up right now. In Los Angeles County, some homeowners have zip-tied someone that they saw lighting fires, and they've got an arson suspect arrested in Woodland Hills fire near the Kenneth fire. So it's arson involved as well. So that's not climate change. That's human interaction, and the human interaction on the urban forest boundary keeps getting bigger and bigger. More and more people are living next to forest and brushlands that can burn. And so climate change really isn't a factor here.
I would have to agree from a less scientific standpoint than you maybe, Anthony, but weather patterns change over time. And so what the whole climate change argument really boils down to me is that what does mankind have to do to move back into a cave and not do anything or cut our population? That's really what these people are talking about. We have to go back to the horse and buggy like we were talking about a minute ago, or somehow try and electrify everything even without the grid to do so. They don't really offer solutions because, like we were talking about, if Senator Kennedy asked them, okay, so how much of a grid are we going to be able to put in place to replace all these gas stoves and gas cars and gas trucks and trains? They don't have a plan to replace everything with electricity. They just, it's pie in the sky until 15 years from now we run into this giant dead end, like, oh heck, we should have made more electricity. Now we took all the other infrastructure away. Nobody's drilling for oil anymore. Nobody's producing gas and diesel engines. Nobody knows how to repair them anymore. They don't care what's going to happen to us in 15 years. They just want this little political win right now, and we're going to be in a really bad way. I'm going to have to go dig my old D8s that are made in the 40s out of the barn, at some point in the future, because that's all that'll run on the fuel that we hope to be making then. You know what I'm saying? So they don't really have a complete solution. It's like high-speed rail. They don't even know how they're going to run the route from SF all the way to LA. They don't have the land. It's just like government. These guys. It's about the feel-good thing that they pass right now, and don't really have the full plan from stem to stern on how the thing's really going to work. They don't care because it's a political win for today, and they'll be gone tomorrow.
Yep. I appreciate that, Congressman, very much. We do have some questions, I think, for you and for the panels here. So, Linnea, this is your favorite part of the show, so please take it away.
Oh, I don't know if I would say that. This is a great part of the show, but the whole show is my favorite. Okay. See? Yeah. I could, yeah. All right. So, okay. So I'm going to try and get questions for Doug to start, just in case he has to disappear or in case his stream cuts out. So our first question is kind of a funny one from KWOMF8, who says, why did the congressman change his jacket?
Okay, I was outside a while ago with my big jacket on, and we were kicked out of our building because of some alarm deal. So now I'm inside another building after I was trying to be on time with the first attempt at the podcast here. And so anyway, we were just outside. Now I'm in my lighter inside jacket.
There you go.
Awesome. Okay. This is from Terry Barnes.
Climate didn't change.
Yes. Oh, okay. Got it. This is from Terry Barnes, who asks, what are the biggest restrictions to harvesting more board feet per year from California public lands? And I believe this has to do with timber, is what he's asking.
Yeah, that's the impediment is environmental organizations suing every time a timber harvest proposal comes out. Even after fires, even salvage jobs, they sue. There was like a 700,000 acre fire on California's northern coast, I think primarily Mendocino County, maybe Humboldt, some years ago. They wanted to go in and just do some cleanup around, I believe, a little more urban areas or something like that, in around communities and highways. only 4,000 acres out of the 700,000, which is about 2%. They had to study it for a couple of years, and somebody sued that the study wasn't complete enough for every single species being able to be thought of. And so so the court ruled, oh, you're going to have to restudy it again. By that time that happens, the salvageable timber is no longer viable, because timbers, after it's been burnt or singed, you still got good trees that have good wood in them. But after a year and a half, you're not going to salvage much of that wood, at least as far as value. So that's now it's all just chip. It's all just scrap. So that's just a prime example on salvage after a fire. If you want to do green cutting, then it's even more difficult, especially on federal lands. We need Forest Service to be much more aggressive on this, and we'll be talking to the Trump administration about getting more aggressive people in there, because, again, they have 193 million acres in their purview that they are not getting after it. They need to be, they had an so-called ambitious plan a couple of years ago they launched that was going to do maybe 1% per year. Well, that means it takes 100 years to get over all the land. We're going to keep dying off at this rate. As well, when they keep allowing these fires to happen and they're burning neighboring private lands, we have folks in NorCal that are concerned that their private lands have suffered so much damage that they need the Forest Service to open up some of their lands, and they're hesitant to do it because they get sued all the time, and I don't know if they have the gumption to fight the lawsuits anyway. Excuse me.
Thank you very much. This is from Energy Colonizer, who asks, what can be done about any predatory real estate practices following disasters for California, or maybe at a national level?
A good point there. We kind of observed some of that stuff with Lahaina, it seems, and now with that's a pretty insightful question, because it seems that if people have a piece of land that they, and this is a little conspiratorial, but maybe not, that if there's an area that they like, maybe they make sure they have a fire there, then they can come in and pick it up a nickel on the dollar after the insurance pays people off or doesn't. So I think we need to watch very closely that the people that are there, or people like them, have first crack at developing once again where they were, and that it isn't just conglomerates coming in buying it up, Blackrock or whoever like that coming in and buying all this and trying to turn a lot more profit off of that later. So it's a good point.
All right. And I don't know what this is, but this is from a frequent viewer of ours, Diane Selby, who asks, what is NAWAPA and how would that bring more water to California?
You're going to have to help me with that acronym there, Diane.
Yeah, acronyms are bad. Oh, no.
Let me see.
There's
North American Water and Power Alliance.
Okay, WAPA, is the Western Power Line Association there. So I can't really say a lot about that particular plan of what that is, but in general, if we're looking at the ability to tap into other areas of the West that has an excess water supply, we need to be looking at that. Some people think it's absurd or it's crazy, but if we can pipe water from other areas that have too much and tie it into or just helping out with the Colorado River, if it doesn't directly go to us, the Colorado River is way overtapped. And in the end, that does help Southern Cal too, which California has the right of 4.4 million acre feet out of the Colorado, but our neighboring states also have that right. And everybody's going to have to see more cutbacks. We're seeing that it's very difficult to fill Lake Powell and Lake Mead. Mead has come up somewhat. Powell's in pretty big trouble. There was conversation about tearing out the dam at Lake Powell because it just isn't filling up very often, and that'd be horrific. So if there's ways we can augment these water supplies, and if that's what that is looking at, then I think we need to study it. But obviously, other people have the rights to their water in their areas, and we don't get to bully them out of the water in other states, unless it's helpful. I mean, areas that flood out, you're talking Mississippi River sometimes. If you could bring it from that far, that'd be helpful. So I hope that answers what she's talking about. NAWAPA is not something I've terribly familiar with under that name.
Sure. We just got this one from Mad Incraft, who says, what can we do to stop insurance companies from fleeing the state after all these events?
Well, it's I believe in freedom and free enterprise, so you can't force an insurance company to stay any more than I can force, somebody to come replace my roof at a cheap price. They have to be able to cover risk and make a living on what they do. I mean, Doug's a big insurance company guy. I'm not saying that, but the original concept of insurance was, an idealistic one of like a group of people have a shared pool of risk. They all put money into it, and one guy's covered wagon gets destroyed. Well, at least everybody else's covered wagon is not destroyed, so we help that guy with his, right? That's my country way of saying insurance is just shared risk. So what we have in California is that we saw with the Paradise Fire, some of the small insurance companies that had been there providing coverage, they went bankrupt because it was such an all-encompassing wide fire and burned so many, destroyed so much, and put them out of business. So they didn't have the reserves in their pool of being able to pay off all those because they underestimated the risk in Paradise. And that would be the same probably for any unmanaged forested area. Take Shingletown, take Westwood, take what used to be Greenville and Canyon Dam. If they couldn't charge the insurance rates that are commensurate with the level of risk, and how there's a scientific way to figure that out. I couldn't quite tell you here, but you got a lot of trees, a lot of dead trees, a lot of density of trees next to your town. If I'm an insurance writer, I don't know if I'd be doing it. I'd have to get a pretty good return. And as bad as it's getting in California, you're looking at Lloyd's of London type rates with such a high risk these days. And what I'm afraid of here after this one is that what insurance is left is probably going to pull out because and unless we're doing our part in government to minimize risk on managing forest lands, the brush lands, around Southern California by having, if it's possible, controlled burns, having grazing, having mechanical removal of vast amounts of brush, whatever it takes, we have to be doing that. We can't have environmental regulations and lawsuits that we keep paying attention to stop this effort. So because it comes back to insurability. Now look at the town of Paradise now. It should be much more insurable for a new home there for a couple reasons. A, hundreds of thousands of trees are gone in the area. And B, the types of buildings they're putting up aren't 50, 60, 70, 80-year-old buildings that didn't have the same roofing materials or other aspects to home building. The vents that can suck embers into the attic and things like that. When we're building them, maybe build more out of stucco. Maybe have roofs that are only made out of the Spanish tiles type thing that can't catch fire, right? And then you're keeping the foliage away from your home like people should be doing. All those things make things more insurable. If you make it insurable, someone will eventually recognize, hey, there's a market for me as an insurance company to come in and write insurance because the risk level is low enough. I can justify making a living at insuring folks with the level of risk that allows me to do so. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, Congressman, I just have a quick question. I mean, isn't it the case that the state of California put a cap on what insurance companies could charge, yes, in other words, to mitigate their risk? And it's because of that all these people got dumped? Exactly, right.
I should have tacked that on there. Yes, the insurance commissioner for quite a while, I think in order to look heroic to ratepayers, has kept a cap on insurance rates for homeowners, fire insurance, for several years. And basically, when people look at the bottom line that would write insurance and say, look, I can't make money and my risk is so high for the level of return, that's where they pull out. And now, now the insurance commissioner seems to be thawing a little bit on the idea of allowing rates to move a bit more. And I'm not saying, hey, I want higher rates for everybody per se, but the level has to be commensurate with the risk, okay?
Yeah.
And I don't want them to make massive profits on this like you see in some quarters here, but it needs to be where it makes sense from a risk standpoint for them to do it. You know, I can say it over and over again, but yeah, the insurance commissioner in the state of California, in order to try and look like they're consumer protectors, have actually made it where the consumers have less choices. It's going to boil down to the only one maybe available is going to be one called the FAIR Act, which is sponsored by the state, which is really expensive and its coverage is fairly limited.
All right.
Yep. Okay, we're gonna have to go a little bit quick. We've run quite a bit over today, but this is really good information.
Much, but I'll try and do lightning.
That's okay. We'll do a little bit of a lightning round here. All right. So first lightning round, and Doug, if you don't know exactly, actually Anthony might know the answer to this question, but I'm sure you do too, Doug. This question is from Ray, who says, "Why don't people with those beautiful houses do their own forest management around their land?"
Cal Fire urges them to. They talk about, defensible space and 100-foot setbacks. They're talking more like 200-foot setbacks. And what you see around some of the ones that happen, like in Redding, and people have foliage too close to their house, and we like it that way. But if you're in a somewhat risky fire zone, you can't have bushes and trees right up against your house. You got to have that stuff away from your house, and your landscaping needs to reflect the level of risk we're talking about here. So it's now I'll throw it to Anthony on that, but that's my 2 bits.
Well, I would say it's because a lot of these people that own these fancy houses don't know how to use hand tools. Simply because they don't go out there and work with their hands. They've got a gardener for hire, and maybe they don't want to pay for it. Who knows? But yeah, the best thing you can do is make defensible space.
Yep. All right.
Well,
Next lightning round. Sorry, Sterling, did you have something to add?
I was going to say the best thing you could do is not move into a fire zone.
Yeah.
Look, if you're worried about hurricanes, don't move to places where there are hurricanes. And if you're worried about wildfires, don't move to places where wildfires are prone.
Yeah.
If you don't,
it's like living in Hawaii and being surprised that there's lava floating through your living room.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, lightning round.
So
So
respond to Sterling's real quick too. Part
Yeah.
of the problem is it's so difficult to get developable land in California and maybe other areas. They don't let us develop on the open space. Anthony, you know this very well. That area is south and east of Chico. We should have been building houses there for a long time, and instead, because we got meadow foam there, we got ferry strip there. So where do they end up? They end up in floodplains down by Marysville. They end up on prime ag ground because the permits and it's a species deal. It's really Butte County meadow foam is no different than the meadow foam they grew up in Oregon for a seed oil crop, and they harvest it. And so it's always environmental stuff. It stops development where we should be doing it. So we build in floodplains and on prime ag land and up in forested areas where they can get permits. That's what drives a lot of that. So a lot of these areas are livable if it wasn't for the environmental regs and lawsuits that stop it, man.
yeah. So this question is something that I see a lot of floating around online. A lot of it originates from a meme or a green text from 4chan that was posted a while ago. It's not false, but it's also I'm wondering if it's exaggerated a little bit. So I'm curious to know what the panel thinks about this. So Archie's mom asks, someone online today said that there were a lot of eucalyptus trees in the area. Australian botanists called these trees incendiary devices from hell. Are there many of these there?
Yeah, there's a lot of them. I just looked up some information on it. These were introduced by Australians during the California gold rush, and a lot of them were planted in the 1900s. And so they're basically saying that this is an invasive species. It's being non-native to the area, and because it tends to have a lot of an oily sap, it's like a dry Christmas tree, it just goes up poof like that. And so that contributes to these fires. Also, I've noticed a lot of palm trees where the crowns of the palm trees were on fire during the LA fire. Some of those palm trees are not native either. So, we've got a combination of high fire conditions, Santa Ana winds, and invasive species that go up like, blow torches, all adding to this problem.
Thank you very much. Okay, Anthony, this is probably going to be another one for you. Chris Nisbet asks, can somebody talk about the claim from Mann on some TV show that the Santa Ana winds now overlap with warm, dry weather because of climate change, implying that it didn't used to?
Well, I don't know exactly what Mann's comment was, and so I can't really speak to it, but Santa Ana winds have been seasonal for millennia, and it's typically based on when a high pressure system gets east of California, gets east of the San Bernardino Mountains and so forth, and the way the flow is set up from the high pressure, it creates these winds, these katabatic winds that rush down slopes and warm up and speed up as they're doing that. are the main reason for these fires. And to claim it's climate change is causing this or that is just, in my opinion, rubbish.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that real quick.
Yeah.
There were I don't know what Michael Mann's comment was. I think Mackie Wylicki posted it on Twitter, the interview segment, but I haven't watched it yet because I've been traveling. But I'll take a look at it and I might comment on it later. But if that's what he said, that doesn't make any sense because Anthony just explained that. But also another thing that we should consider here is that how does these Santa Ana wind events, the frequency of them, how does it change? And say if the climate warms, and that models, again, models are not evidence of anything. Models are just simulations, but they can be useful tools. But there's no consensus, and I hate to say that word, but there's no agreement about how Santa Ana wind events change, in response to a change in radiation balance in the atmosphere. There are some studies that suggest that they decrease, and that the ridging patterns and the gradients they would tighten due to warming, but that doesn't make any sense physically. And then there's other research, it's more recent research that suggests that they actually decrease because the gradient, the southwestern pressure gradient, decreases, which would decrease the acceleration of these downsloping or katabatic winds. So there's not any clear indication on how that will change in the future. So Michael, if that's what he had said, that's definitely wrong.
Another contributor to these things is we talked about invasive species, the eucalyptus, palm trees. What really burns in the West is the invasive species called cheatgrass, which has invaded which has replaced native grasses that used to burn, but they burn mildly. They wouldn't destroy root systems. Cheatgrass comes in, burns very hot, and replaces native vegetation, and then spreads. It's the kudzu of the West.
And we need to have much more grazing and prescribed burns to control this stuff. And we need to have the permits put out at lightning speed to do so. Just a quick note, too. We were talking about the insurance and we talked about the FAIR plan. We happen to be sitting here with a TV nearby, and I spotted a stat on the TV that shows people subscribing to California's FAIR plan it has doubled. The number of subscribers has more than doubled in just a 4-year period. And if you know anything run by the state or run by the federal government, then it's probably not going to hold up very long, because you look at this, how Medi-Cal, Medicaid, Social Security, or the federal deficit. I mean, do you have faith that this is going to be able to be the cornerstone of insurance in California, to be a state-run program? That's really scary to me. That could be it. And yet, what's more insurance likely to be running away from here unless we make it easy for them? Government's probably going to have to find a way to help them with that.
Right. So this is another question from Slartibartfast, and this is for you, Doug, that says, why doesn't California, with its long coastline, build desal plants to increase their water supply?
3 words: California Coastal Commission.
Yeah.
That's 3 of them. A group called Polaris tried for 20 years to build one, I think off of Huntington Beach, one of the Southern California towns. They worked for 20 years to research and jump through the hoops that, Coastal Commission and others were throwing at them. They'd say, well, you need to do this. So they'd fix this. And they'd do, well, there's that. And after 20 years and millions of dollars were put in place to jump through every possible hoop they could come up with to get the permits, they still told them no at the end after about 20 years. It was Poseidon, not Polaris. Poseidon desal. And the criminal thing is that desal takes so much energy to take the salt back out of the water. If you would just catch it a few miles inland before it hits the water, such as the Delta, such as other outlets that hit the ocean, you're already catching basically salt-free, clean water as runoff. It's absurd how much water we're letting run out the Delta, hundreds of thousands, even millions of acre feet, that we only have to corral. If we corralled 5 million more acre feet in this state, it'd be amazing. And we get much more runoff than that on the Sierra Nevada. And we could be putting that into San Luis Reservoir and filling that up and sending it down the aqueduct and filling all the others. as well as having plenty of what we need for Northern California for our people and towns and crops. And so desal, I'm not against it, but it's a really expensive way to do it. And you just, as I mentioned, look up that Poseidon project that was on Huntington Beach or one of those Southern California beach towns, and how hard they fought, and they had the Coastal Commission shoot it down after all that effort. So, I mean, they use desal pretty well in the Arab countries and such, and it could be a tool, but it does require one heck of a lot of power. So if you wanted to do it, build a nuclear power plant next to a desal plant and let them just run by themselves. You can go hard at it, but we have the fresh water we need. We don't need to change it back because we didn't catch it in time before it hit the ocean, you know.
That's a good point. Let's see. I don't know how many more questions we have time for. It's getting pretty close. Yeah, we're gonna.
You tell me to hang up when you want me to hang up.
No. Well, we've gone over, but this is such an important discussion that I don't think anybody here minds. And if there weren't time constraints, I think we could do this forever. So, but I'll throw up another couple of them. We've got this one, which asks, who exactly investigates these fires, and how confident can we be in their findings? Do we know that one? I think he just got distracted, but
yeah, I think Doug is answering a question with someone else.
But, is that for me?
It's now 11:30, 12:30.
It can be for you if you know the answer, but if nobody knows the answer, that's all right.
Oh, well, you know, CAL FIRE, I guess, investigates a lot. They did it on the campfire. They would probably do a lot of the load on this. I think they'd be best equipped to investigate fire in this case. So I would imagine it'd be CAL FIRE doing most of that. You might have Cal OES, Office of Emergency Services, might have a role, but the guys who are going to know best about fire at this level is going to be CAL FIRE. It isn't really, I think, going to be a Forest Service issue or any of the other ones. They might want to have input, you know, the federal parks, they might want to have input, but the best, probably the most qualified to do it is going to be CAL FIRE. Just shooting from the hip on that one.
And there seems to be at least rumor going around that many of these fires might have started from arson rather than anything else, any natural or accidental. Right? I mean, at least that's the general narrative online right now, but who knows when that stuff is floating around.
Yeah, the investigations will point it out. Now, when you see a guy in a neighborhood that they arrested at a torch, and you know, I mean, I hate to say this out loud too much, but it's the perfect opportunity for mayhem from international terrorism on this. We have so much tinderbox that when you see an opportunity with all this wind, I mean, you can wreak some real havoc, man. And some of these, more locally, we see that some of these gang groups are taking advantage of the fire to go out and do massive amounts of looting. I've heard one where they're very organized. There's several of them in bands heading into, I think it was Hollywood Hills. They have people spotting for them, and while they head up and hit homes. And so you have at different levels, whether it's eco-terrorism from international, you got gangs that are looking at just for opportunity, or you have homeless encampments that are, the ratio of homeless fires have gone up dramatically as well in the area there, from I think double digits to thousands because of that situation. So we look at, again, what is our leadership doing on all these aspects? You know, California threw $24 billion at homelessness, and Newsom is bragging that we've only slowed the increase of homelessness compared to other states. Like, well, they've already all moved here, you know, and so at some point it has to tail off because they run out of benefit space or whatever, you know.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's going to have to be it for us. Jim?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Congressman Doug LaMalfa. Thank you so much for being on the Climate Realism Show today. It was very informative. I know that our growing audience that grew throughout the show really appreciated being able to question you directly, and we hope to have you on again in the future. Before we go, I want to thank again our streaming.
Thank you, and I appreciate the panelists on here, all your insight as well. And if I think was it Chris? You had that interesting piece on the 2009. If you wouldn't mind shooting that back to us on on the CO2 originally ruled by Obama as a poisonous thing. I want to find that and refresh that, because that's good stuff. Anyway, I'll get out of the way. Thank you so much.
Yeah, he'll definitely do that. And Congressman Chris followed you on X, and that's a really big deal. He's a big deal on X, so you should feel honored that Chris Martz followed you on X today during the show. I want to thank our streaming partners today, as we always do. That's junkscience.com, CFACT, Climate Depot, and What's Up With That. Always visit climaterealism.com. Always visit climateataglance.com. Go to What's Up With That to really read some great stuff about the climate from a realist perspective. And as always, visit heartland.org and sign up for our climate change weekly newsletter. Just hit subscribe, maybe even hit the donate button up there in the top left corner. Thank you all on the panel for today. Thank you, Chris Martz, for coming in today. I know you have a busy day, and I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, and thank you to everybody in the chat here on YouTube, and always listening everywhere else that we broadcast this great Climate Realism show. And we will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.